Last week I mentioned how when I was on my 30-day silent retreat, God helped me to overcome a fear of water that had originated when I got stung by a jellyfish. And another fear that God helped me to overcome during my silent retreat was the ways that I was at first reluctant to leave where I was praying for my nighttime prayer period, since at one point in the retreat you do 5 prayer hours a day, and one of them is especially at the later hours, like before you would go to sleep, basically. And in that particular prayer hour, I was very comfortable. There was a nice little setup. I was in a duplex by myself, and it had a little cozy, one of those cozy chairs you kind of sink into, and I'd gotten used to doing that particular prayer. And I remember when God said, I want you to go outside to do this prayer period. And I said, no, thank you. I'm quite comfortable where I'm at right now. And I'll let you know that he reminded me of the Acts of the Apostles and how the disciples were in the upper room at that moment when I said, no, thank you. He says, they were comfortable in that upper room too. Sometimes God gives one of the zingers that go right there, that pierces you. Because in that moment I realized, yeah, I was just like the disciples in that particular moment. I was comfortable, and literally where this duplex was, it was literally because it was near Old Tampa Bay. It was a raised up duplex in case any water, etc. would come over if there was like a big storm. So I literally was in a upper room, so to speak, where I was doing this prayer period. And I remember how hard it was for me at first to come out of that place where I'd been comfortable and instead go and do that prayer period where God was leading me, where I didn't know quite where it was going to be like, because it was one that was outside. And it was actually one of the most powerful prayer periods I had during the entire retreat, where I experienced God's consolation in a way that I wouldn't have expected. And you see what was interesting about it, it was literally one of the most windy, stormy, etc. There had just been a storm that had blown through. Part of the reason I was reluctant to go outside and do that prayer period outside, I was like, God, like, literally there was just a storm. It's going to be all wet, going to be all this wind, etc. And where the Lord led me was dry. And yes, there was wind. But the best way, again, it's one of those prayer periods, it's impossible to put into words exactly, but just the way I felt God's presence in everything and the way that everything was speaking to me in that particular moment was very profound. I like to say that's what I think Pentecost was like for Jesus' followers when the Holy Spirit came upon them. They were terrified. They were stuck in place. They knew that Jesus was calling them to do something after he had ascended back to heaven, but they didn't know how to do it. They were so afraid, they were stuck. And then the Holy Spirit came upon them and moved them out of that place of where they were frozen in fear and stuck. And the reason why we're here today is because of what happened on that day. It's why Pentecost is considered to be the birthday of the church. Father John had the birthday song sung for the church at the other masses. I don't think I'm going to do that quite myself, brother, okay? But I affirm him in the sense of very well recognizing that idea of this being the birthday of the church. And the reason for that is because when a birthday happens, new life is born. There was a new life that came upon Jesus' disciples, and they transmitted that new life to the rest of the world as well. And it's interesting in today's gospel how we hear that they were called to testify, and that Jesus had many more things to tell them, but they could not bear it yet. Could not bear it yet. That word is very profound and very powerful to pray upon that particular verbiage. There are moments in our lives where we're just not ready for a particular responsibility, a particular task, a particular mission that God will ask us to. But then we invite the Holy Spirit in, and things change, things shift. And I'll let Father John know, I actually had a very funny moment in a prayer period with this particular gospel passage, Father John, because Father John likes Phineas and Ferb, and so he showed me this video of where one of the characters talks about testifying. And so when I heard this testifying in that particular prayer period, God brought me back to that particular song. So know that Phineas and Ferb made a prayer period, Father John. So there you go. But the idea of testifying is that we are in joy witnessing through the truth of the gospel. And that's why, because at first I was like, Lord, is this a distraction that's coming in here with this Phineas and Ferb? But he was saying, no, there's a lot of joy in that particular memory for you. Testifying so often, unfortunately, it's like we testify and you think someone just died. Like when you think of the way of witnessing to the gospel that sometimes is made, like there's no new life there, there's no joy, there's nothing that would want someone to move forward into this moment. But when you testify with the power of the Holy Spirit moving in oneself, there's a movement, there's a joy, there's an excitement, there's an energy that is present. It's why we did all the stuff we're doing after Mass today with the raffle, with the plate sale, because we're trying to capture that energy and to testify to how the Holy Spirit brings joy in proclaiming the gospel. It can be a lot of fun and joyful to proclaim the good news of the gospel to the world. The disciples went from being frozen in that place in the upper room to literally, when God shows me any time in prayer what it was like when Peter was giving that first homily that converted thousands of people on the spot, he was having fun. And I'll let you know in ministry, as I'm sure Father John and my brother deacons and the clergy can testify to, there are moments when in ministry, it's just fun. You're witnessing to some truth, the Holy Spirit is flowing, and you're having a great time, and those that are at that particular talk or in that particular retreat or whatever it is at that particular moment, holy hour, etc., are having a wonderful time as well. That to me is what Pentecost was like. And I'll let you know, after this last year, I think we could sorely need something like that, right? Because how many people have felt stuck? How many people have felt frozen? How many people have felt like it's been difficult to go forward? I'll give you a hint. Those are all telltale signs of a major need to ask for the Holy Spirit to come upon us in that place. And the prayer that God taught me during my silent retreat was what I've called a prayer of poverty, prayer of poverty. And that prayer of poverty goes like this. Lord, thank you for my poverty. Thank you for those ways I'm not enough. Thank you for those ways I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. For those ways that sometimes I feel stuck. Thank you for that space that leaves me to invite you into. Holy Spirit, come into that place. Help me to move forward. Help me to speak your words. Help me to move as you invite me to move. Help me to make that difference that you're inviting me to make today. And I've been praying that prayer daily since my retreat. And it's amazing the difference it makes. Because the truth is, all of us have limits. All of us don't know what to do in certain moments, don't know what to say, don't know how to accomplish that mission or purpose that God has entrusted to our care. And the good news of the Holy Spirit and Pentecost is we don't have to. All we have to do in those moments is acknowledge that we are poor, is to acknowledge that we don't have the answers or know how to do it. And just let the Holy Spirit move in that moment. And in that moment, with that invitation, the Holy Spirit will transform us, and the Holy Spirit will transform the world as well. I'll now say a summary of this in Spanish. En mi retiro fue muchos momentos de temor y miedo. Y recuerdo un momento cuando no quiero salir de mi cuarto en una hora de oración. Y que la invitación de Dios fue de salir de este cuarto donde fue muy cómodo. Y fue en conexión con Pentecostés para mí, hermanos y hermanas. Porque en este momento salió de mis miedos y temores y del lugar donde sentí cómodo. Hay momentos en nuestra vida cuando es fácil de quedar en un lugar que es cómodo para nosotros, por miedo o porque no queremos mover o no sabemos cómo es posible de salir de un lugar en un momento. En estos momentos el Espíritu Santo quiere ayudarnos de salir de los miedos de miedo y temor y de entrar en una experiencia totalmente diferente. Hay momentos cuando no sabemos las cosas que necesitamos hacer en varios momentos o no tenemos palabras suficientes en algunos momentos. Pero el Espíritu Santo quiere ayudarnos con las palabras del Espíritu Santo en estos momentos y de guiarnos con las acciones correctas en estas situaciones. En mi retiro, el Espíritu Santo enseñó una oración a mí, una oración de pobreza. Y esta oración de pobreza es como eso. Dios, soy débil, soy pobre. No tengo las palabras que necesito. No sé las acciones que necesito hacer en estas circunstancias. No sé cómo yo puedo cumplir esta misión que tú dio a mí. Ayúdame, Espíritu Santo, en mi pobreza, en mi necesidad, en este espacio vacío. Guíame, ilumíname con sus palabras, con sus acciones. Ayúdame de cumplir la voluntad del Padre en mi misión. Y después de orar esta oración de pobreza, hermanos y hermanas, algo cambia en mí siempre. Desesperación salió, mis miedos y temores salió. Y el Espíritu Santo entra. El secreto para tener una experiencia del Espíritu Santo es de ofrecer una invitación al Espíritu Santo. Y en un espíritu de humildad, de realizar que somos débiles, que no tenemos la fuerza necesaria y que este es algo bueno, porque este es el momento perfecto para tener un encuentro con el Espíritu Santo y de invitar la gracia del Espíritu Santo de guiarnos en estos momentos. Así sea.